Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth. I'm Caesar Carino, your host, and our guest today is Chlorice Guiley. Chlorice, you've been around Wadsworth for a long time. Do you mind telling us how long you've been in Wadsworth?
Well, about 84 years.
84 years. You probably were born here because you don't...
I was.
Or probably you were born in another life because you look about 50 or 60
Oh,
yet.
thank you.
When were you born? Tell us when you were born.
I was born February 8th, 1914.
So you passed your 84th birthday already. You're going toward 85.
Well, yes.
And you look really wonderful. That's wonderful. We're really pleased when our quote, senior citizens, of which I am one, look as good as you do. Tell us who you were before you were Chlorice Guiley, what your maiden name, your brothers and sisters and parents and all that. Who were you?
I was Chlorice Bird.
B-Y-R-D.
No, B-I.
B-I-R-D. I want to make sure of that because we have both.
Right.
B-I-R-D. And you're related to the tons of birds in Wadsworth, right?
Right.
And how many birds are still living in Wadsworth?
Well, I don't know how many. I
There are a lot of them.
but
I haven't counted them.
there's several, yes.
Who are some of the birds that are related to you?
Their married names?
No, well, yes, if you can remember them.
Okay, Richard Bird.
Richard Bird, of course, that's his name, and
Yes,
he lives out on
High Street.
High Street.
Yeah. And Wanda Sanders Bird was Uncle Ed's daughter. And there's Esta and Evelyn Bird.
Right.
I don't know their married names.
Well, I know them very well, and then there was Irene there also.
Yes, Irene
just
passed
died.
away, yeah.
Now, she was a cousin, right?
Yes, she was.
She was a cousin. Irene was a fourth grade teacher of mine, fifth grade teacher of mine back in 1940 or 41. And then later on, I became principal of a school in Norton, and she became a teacher in that building, which I was principal. I had two like that, Audrey Miller and Esther Bird. Esther Grindle was her married name. And what about your brothers and sisters?
I had two sisters. There were two brothers, but they died as babies.
As babies?
Yeah. And my older sister is Bessie Weaver. Bessie Bird Weaver.
And where is she?
She's in Wadsworth now. She had been in Johnson's Corners most of her life, married life.
Now, her husband did what kind of work?
Construction.
Construction, carpentry work,
Yes.
right? Roy Flood used to work for Mr.
I
Weaver.
think so,
That's
yes.
Roy Flood used to work for Mr. Weaver many, many years ago. Roy Flood would probably be about 110 years old now. His son Kenny still lives in town.
Right.
And then there's Mary lives in Doylestown. Betty lives in Wadsworth. Ruthie lives somewhere else, I've forgotten where, somewhere around here. But Roy Flood used to work for Weaver. He was a Finnish carpenter, and a very, very, very good one, as we all know. That was your brother-in-law then, that was
Bob Weaver.
Bob Weaver, right.
Yes.
Now, did they have a son also?
No.
They did not have a son.
That would have been his nephew.
His nephew, Bob Weaver?
His Bob Weaver's brother, Clara, had a son.
Oh, I see. Okay. Bob Weaver's nephew had a son. Okay.
No, his brother had a son.
Oh, his brother had a son.
And that would be Bob's nephew.
Oh, Bob's nephew.
Yeah.
And was that boy's name Bob also?
No.
No.
Junior's all I ever heard.
Junior, that's good. That's close enough. Now, we have your sister, what was her first name?
Bessie.
Bessie Weaver.
Bessie Bird Weaver.
Bessie Bird Weaver, and she lives in Wadsworth?
Yes, Bob passed away around 10 years ago.
Right.
And so she's in Lincoln Manor now.
In Lincoln Manor, okay. And anybody else? You had two brothers who passed on.
Yeah, and then I have another sister, Charlotte.
She older or younger?
She's younger, Charlotte Bird Booyer.
Booyer, but she's not around Wadsworth, is she?
She's in Medina.
In Medina, okay. Well, we have that pretty well taken care of. And who were your mother and father?
My father was Tom Bird Jr. His father was Tom Bird Sr., of course.
Right.
And my father was born here in Wadsworth.
And he would probably be close to 110 or 12 years old now, wouldn't he?
Right. Mother died in 96, and she was 102.
102, so
when she died.
born in 94. I mean 1894, right?
1893 is what I...
1893? And what
And
about
Dad was born 1891.
1891? So he'd be about 107 years old now, or so. And he has been gone for quite some time, though, hasn't he?
Oh, yes, he died in 1968.
Yeah.
He was 77.
77 years old when he died. And what did your father do here in town? I think that's pretty significant.
Yes, well, he was a teamster,
Teamster.
in early
But
times.
you're not talking about a union person. You're talking about a teamster, a person who drove teams.
Drove teams.
And what did he drive for? For whom did he drive?
Well, for people who needed him, I suppose. He hauled coal, and probably, I don't know, maybe dug cellars. They were very hard workers.
Oh, the birds. Oh, heavens, yes.
Very hard workers.
Men and women alike. They're
Right.
all really, really hard workers.
Right.
Your cousins, one of my favorite people is Esther Bird. I don't know her married name, but I know it, but I can't think of it. But boy, she is a worker. They're
Yeah,
good
they
workers.
are.
They're
They
wonderful
are.
people. Well, where else did your father drive? I mean, what else did he drive? What other people did he work for here in Wadsworth?
Well, he had a business of his own, a
Right.
hay and feed business.
That's what let's talk about that business. Tell us again what the name of it is.
Well, it was a hay and feed, as far as I know, business.
Hay and feed.
Yeah,
Right.
yes.
And where was that?
Well, that was on Berge Street where we lived, and there was a barn at the way back of the house.
And near the railroad track, wasn't it?
Well, it was Berge Street. It was up, what would that be, 2 or 3 streets? 3 streets, Mechanic, and then Walnut, and then...
No, I know, but let's see, the railroad track makes a big curve there, but wasn't your house down closer to the railroad track, or was it closer to the main street?
It was closer to Main Street.
Okay, all right. Then there was another big barn back there.
And he had a hay baler, and he would bale hay. The farmers would bring their hay
That's right.
in, and he would bale it and store it in his barn or deliver it to his customers, like the Akron Pure Milk Company in Akron.
That's correct.
And that's the sort of thing that he did.
Now, do you remember when he drove horses as a teamster?
Not really. I don't remember that so much.
Okay, what did he drive then? When the first vehicle you remember your father, what kind of truck was it?
Was it a Mack?
It could have been. I don't remember really.
I don't remember either. I remember the first car.
And what was that?
That was a Rio.
Rio, R-E-O.
Yeah, Rio.
Which stands for R-E-Olds, O-L-D-S, Oldsmobile.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, R-E-O, and the R-E-O trucks also. His first name started with an R, and his middle initial was E. His last name was O-L-D-S, Olds, and then that's where the Oldsmobile came from.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I bet I can tell you what color your father's truck was.
Is that right?
Black.
I don't know.
Almost all of them were black at that time. Now, he had the hay and feed business.
Yes.
And he would deliver these kinds of things. What about your mother? What did she do?
She was a homemaker.
Homemaker, and that's what
she
everyone
helped-
did.
She helped Dad a lot.
They surely did.
She even bailed a couple times. Helped.
And I bet you got your fingers in there too a few times, didn't you?
we were not allowed. We had to stay away.
You had to stay away.
Yeah, I suppose there was danger. I don't know.
Oh, you bet there's danger,
Yeah.
especially those older machines. They had no safety or very, very little safety equipment.
Right.
The only safety equipment was the stealth of one's ability to get away from it, or to stay away from it, I should say. Tell us about your very early days in for instance, 1920, when you first started school in Wadsworth. Where was it?
Franklin School.
Franklin School. It was built by that time, was it not?
Well, yes.
It was 5 years old when you started school there. It was built in 1915. And do you remember any of your teachers way back in 1920, which would be 78 years ago?
Where would I be?
In the first grade?
In the first grade. Oh, well, Mabel Hartman.
Mabel Hartman, not Alice Hartman, but Mabel Hartman.
I'm pretty sure it was Mabel
Yes.
Hartman. And Miss Raw.
Which Raw was that?
I-
What was her first name? Of course, we all called them Miss or Mrs. We never called anybody by first name.
That's right.
But the Raws still live in Wadsworth. Many of them.
Oh, do they?
Yes, I think that was Elton's mother, but I'm not positive. But I'll find out as soon as this
She was
program
a-
is aired. I'll get a phone call that it was somebody else.
Oh.
And that's perfectly all right. We welcome that.
She was a wonderful person. I just loved her as a teacher.
Second grade teacher.
I think she was.
And the third grade teacher, do you remember that
I
person?
think Miss Gonzalez.
Miss Gonzalez. And then do you remember the fourth?
Nope.
How about the fifth?
Nope.
Can't remember those two. Do you remember who was the principal, if they had a principal?
No, I don't.
They probably had a
Oh, was that Miss Stoffer?
Miss Stauffer?
Yeah,
Could be.
I think it might have been Miss Stoffer.
But then when you went from Franklin School, you went where?
To Central Middle School.
And do you remember the administration there?
Well, I don't remember whether it was the junior high or whether it was the senior high. I think Mr. Work was probably junior high, wasn't he?
Yes, he was at that time, 1920s.
Mr. Work, and then there was Mr. Giffen and Mrs. Brittlinger.
Mrs. Brittlinger?
Yeah.
Are you
She
sure?
was, Elva Brittlinger.
Elba Hartman.
She was Elva
Hartman. Brittlinger was teaching there in 1926 or 7?
Well, I don't know. That might have been in high school that she was teaching.
English teacher.
Yes.
Yes.
And I was just naming the teachers I remember at the
That's
Central
right.
School.
Elva Hartman Brittlinger, who was from Burgess Street too, would have been a
Oh,
neighbor
yes.
of yours, wouldn't
Right.
she? Did you know her before?
Oh, sure.
Yes, that whole Hartman families. Now the Groover families are also related because Mrs. Groover was a Hartman.
Yes.
And the Groovers lived down there, did they not?
Yes, they
on
did.
Burgess Street. Let's go back to Burgess Street now, and if you remember all of the people who lived on Burgess Street, from where you were when you go out your front door to the left, who lived there?
To the left, Leatherman's, Ray Leatherman.
Ray Leatherman. That's Raymond Leatherman. Did he drive school bus at one time?
Maybe later years.
Yes, I think he did. Now, and they had a son also.
Kenny.
Kenny Leatherman. Now, you lived on the south side of Burgess Street, is that correct? Or the north?
The north.
Okay. Then, when you went out your front door, who lived to the right of you?
Transus.
Which one? Ed Transu?
Yes.
And how many kids did he have at that time?
Well, there was Doris and Mary and Colonel, I think.
Well, Colonel was, you mean that those are the three kids were born by then?
Yes.
And then Carol wasn't born yet, was she?
I don't think
no,
so.
No, because Carol was born
Because I
in
don't know her.
1928 or 29, somewhere in that area. And this would have been, in the teens yet. And then who lived farther away on the right-hand side and the left-hand side?
Well, Groover's on the left-hand side, Groover's and then Hartman's.
Groovers and Hartman's, because they, Mr. Hartman was was he a carpenter also?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he did.
Just a little bit of a man, as I remember.
Yeah, I think so.
A nice person. And then how about going to the right-hand side toward Main Street?
I don't really know.
And how about across the road from you, across the street from you?
Well, at later time, Kunkler's, Bert Kunkler.
Bert Kunkler, all right. What about Collins? Was he there at that time? Collins?
Oh, they lived up
On
the
the corner.
street, on the south side, further up the street.
Right, on the corner there, almost, pretty well on the corner of Main and Berkey. Is that correct?
No, up the other way, east,
East, Collins?
I think.
Well, the man that had the typewriter repair, Fred Collins?
Yeah, I think he was more east of where we lived,
Oh, really? I thought maybe it was,
on the south side, but east.
I thought it was on the corner, but that, we'll find that out too. And do you remember anybody else who lived there in the teens? Well, you probably remember things from 1918 or 19. Do you remember anything about?
Well, there was the Castanizers. She also was a Hartman.
She was a Hartman too, that's correct. And she had sons Alvin Kastelheiser and Bob Kastelheiser, is that correct?
And Clarence.
And Clarence, okay.
Clarence and Dana were the ones I knew.
Okay. Alvin, I think, was born probably in the 20s, and Bob, late 20s, somewhere in that area. Do you remember in 1918 when the war ended, the First World War ended?
Just barely.
Just barely, but you do remember it. Of course, you remember when the Second War ended, because
Right,
it was
yes.
25 years later. You were about 30 years old at the time. Do you remember what the street looked like down there in Bricky Street at the time?
Well, it was nice. You know, it was like our house was nice, but things changed.
Right. What about the street itself? I mean, was it made out of, right now it's
dirt.
a dirt road is what it
Right,
was.
sure.
And
Ditches.
as you would go east toward the Chemetex on Brigy Street, of course, the Brigy Street, or the Chemetex was not on Brigy Street, but it was almost at the end before it goes around that curve. Did that go all the way through, or was that pretty well field back in there at that time?
Burgie Street?
Yes.
It went all the way to Silver Creek
It went all the way to Silver
and
Creek.
across the railroad tracks.
So it went all the way down through there. That was a cinder road at that time, was it not,
Yes.
as I remember? We'll come back to this part because it's so very interesting to know what you remember about that, because I'd like to have you tell us all about the stores in the South End, but tell us a little bit about more of your life. You graduated from high school, and then you did what?
Then I went to Hamill Business School for a short while.
And that was in Akron,
Yes.
right?
it went
And where
about-
was it in Akron at the time? It's moved now, but where was it
It
then?
was on East Market.
East Market Street. Now it's on Bookville Avenue, I'm sorry, on Arlington Street, I believe, Arlington Road or Arlington Street, and it's where the old Fraunfelder School used to be, on Arlington, at the end of Bookville Avenue. But at that time, it's East Market Street. Tell us what we did at Hamill Business School and what a person was prepared to do when he or she came out.
Actually, I only went there a short time until I got a job at the Ohio Salt office as secretary.
Secretary to whom?
Well, I took letters. I was really secretary to Mr. Feely.
And this was Mr. Feely, who lived on Woodland Avenue.
Yes.
And who had a daughter, Anna, and a son.
I don't remember their names.
It'll come to me. I think it's Bob Feely, but not positive. But Anna Feely married Dr. Frank Cleary.
I believe so.
Yes, that's correct. Now tell us about the salt company at that time, who worked there, what Mr. Feely did, and so forth and so on. This is the Ohio Salt, or
The Ohio Salt
not
office.
the Wadsworth Salt?
Not the Wadsworth.
Ohio Salt. But it was, the office was down on Main Street.
The office on Main Street
Right.
beside the match. Well, there was Mr. Everhard,
Which Everhard was that?
Bill Everhard.
Mr. Bill Everhard, and he is related in Wadsworth. How?
Pardon?
How is he related in Wadsworth? Who are his children here in Wadsworth now?
I don't know that he has any in Wadsworth.
Well, who were his children?
He had, I believe his daughter's name was Edith, and his son's name was Bill also, I think.
That's right. And Mr. Everhard was what, the big boss down there?
Yes, he was.
He was the big boss. So what was Mr. Feely?
Mr. Feely was sales manager.
He was sales manager. And Mr. Feely had come there, this would have been in the very early 30s, is that correct?
Yes.
What year, do you remember?
Well, it was probably 32 when I started there, and I didn't start as his secretary. I did more general office work.
Right. Do you remember what secretaries did at those times? Did you have a big computer in front of you?
No.
Did you have a website and have all those kinds of things? What did you have?
Typewriter.
You're fortunate to have that, weren't you?
Well, probably. And there was a teletype. That was kind of modern to today's way.
And what did you do with the teletype, and why did they have a teletype?
Well, they could call their offices, like in Chicago. They could type on there, and the message would go through, and then they could reply. You know, it was like a typewritten letter.
It was the old form of an email, wasn't it?
I think so.
Because you could, but it had to be a direct wire that went through there. They might have used the telephone lines, I'm not sure. But there was a direct wire that went through there, but only factories had it. They weren't in every home, and things of this nature, were
Right.
they? No. And who else worked down there with you at the Ohio Salt?
The girls?
Yes.
Well, my sister Bessie did. Bernice Buckingham.
Bernice Buckingham was Bernice who?
Well, that's her maiden name.
I mean, whom did she?
She married Griffith.
Bernice Griffith, okay. And who else worked down there?
And Mabel Nellis.
Mabel, older sister of the Gertrude Nellis.
Right. And
Mabel was killed in a car crash,
right,
wasn't she?
yes. Ruby Bergner.
And which Bergner would this be?
This would be the twin.
The twin. And the other twin is?
Ruth Flood.
Ruth Flood, Kenny Flood's wife. And then Donna Lind married.
Right, she was a Bergner.
She was a Bergner. So.
Right.
Donna Lind Bergner and Ruth Bergner and
Ruby.
Ruby Bergner. And there were 3 sisters.
Right.
And Ruth is a hairstylist. Ruby was a secretary, and we had Donna in here as a guest, and she started with the Wadsworth schools in 1927.
Oh, really?
And I think she's still working for them, and she's, that's not 100% accurate, but she's still in good shape that she could work for them. Wonderful thing. Tell us what the Ohio salt did. We didn't do any salt mining at that time. This is different from the Wadsworth salt.
Yeah,
right?
yes.
Okay, now what did you do down there?
Well,
I mean, not you personally, but what did they do down there?
Ohio Salt Company was in Rittman, actually. That's where they produced the salt.
But why did we have the office in Wadsworth?
Well, I don't know.
Who owned it?
Who owned the salt company? Well, the Wadsworth people, I suppose.
I think that they...
Everhard and I don't know.
Young's and a few
Young's.
of the other ones. And I think that's why they had it right here in Wadsworth, because they had the buildings down there, and all of them, the match and the injector and the salt, and of course the box board was down.
You're right.
But they called them the Ohio Companies.
Ohio Companies.
Right. Did they, you never saw any salt in there, did you?
No, I didn't.
No. Everything that you did was paperwork.
Right.
When you began to work for Mr. Feely then, how did you get that job? How were promotions given at that time? Now you have to go through, if you've been here so many days and so many hours, and if you are between such and such ages, they have all kinds of criteria now for determining how a person gets promoted. But how were you promoted?
I don't really know. As I say, when I started there, I did general office work. I took dictation from several different people. From Frank Reimer and
Frank Reimer. I wanted to hear some of those people from whom. Who was the other one?
Schreiber.
Mr. Schreiber. His wife's still living.
Yes, I know.
As Marie Schreiber. She lives down at the Towers, I believe. And who else did you have down there?
Some of the other people were Smith, Hank Smith.
Hank Smith. He had a daughter, and I can't think of her name right now. And then weren't the Roths somewhere involved with the Smiths too?
Well, Virginia, I think he remarried after his wife died.
Right.
I think he married Virginia.
Yes, and then that family got together. Hank Smith is a big, tall fellow.
Yes, he was.
Hair back, and he drove a LaSalle, a 1938 LaSalle, which was a big car at that time.
Right.
And these people all worked at the salt company.
Right.
Now, they were not natives of Wadsworth, though, to begin with, were they? Well, obviously, that's redundant. If they weren't natives of Wadsworth, they couldn't be to begin with.
Well, probably some of them, like Charlie Warner.
Charlie Warner was.
And Everhard.
Everhard was, but...
Fisher.
Which Fisher was that? The one who lived on Woodland Avenue?
Ed Fisher.
Ed Fisher, and he had a son, Ed Fisher, as well.
And the ones that are native of Wadsworth?
Yes, and if they still are around here, their families are around here.
I don't know. Smith and Schreiber and Reimer, and there was a Mr. Newberry too came, but I think he was from Rittman.
Mr. Newberry was not a Wadsworth person, no.
That's about all of them.
Now, how long did you work at the salt?
Probably about 5 years.
And then what did you do?
And then I was a homemaker.
You're a homemaker.
Then I had my 2 boys.
Your 2 boys. Tell us about your 2 boys, where they are right now and when they were born.
Well, my Dale is the old Dale Jr., and he was born June 20th, 1939.
1939.
And he's retired from B.F. Goodrich Research Center, and his, you might say, avocations are he's a church organist.
It's more than an avocation. He's a professional. He's a very, very fine organist, absolutely.
Yeah. For 35 years, he's been at Trinity United Church of Christ, and he's a Lake Erie charter captain for walleye fishing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's...
That's more important than the organist?
Well, I don't know. He takes long vacations from the organ now to do that, but he's really enjoying that. And Tom was born March 2nd, 1950, and he's in New York.
And what does he do in New York, Chlorice?
Well, he's been with the state, the state of New York. He's now Deputy Executive Director of the Dormitory Authority of the state of New York.
The Dormitory Authority?
Right.
I didn't know we had a dormitory authority. What do they do?
Sounds like, well, that's what I keep saying. Well, New York State, I don't know if I should say this, builds, they sort of back up New York State in hospitals. They do hospital work and education in all the colleges and the education.
In other words, he is in charge of the building programs for hospitals and universities and so forth.
Well, and for the bonds and the money, getting the money, and that sort of thing. Not building them, but I think he's...
Financial part.
Financial.
Right. No, I don't think he goes out and lays mud, but that. You know, we skipped a paragraph in your life here. Before 1939, you did something else which is very important to your family life, and that is that you married Dale Guiley.
Right.
When did you marry Dale Guiley, and tell us a little bit about the Guiley family? Okay,
I married Dale in 1934, and he came to Wadsworth. His family, he was born in Kenmore.
Right.
And the family came to Wadsworth when he was about 6 years old, and he started to school here. And I met him in junior high school when he was at Lincoln and I was at Franklin. And then we met in junior high school.
Did you kind of go with him all through junior high?
Yep, he was the one and only.
He was the only one? That's probably the only person you ever dated, probably.
Right.
And were you the only girl he ever dated?
I doubt it.
Doubt it? But he was the only one that you ever dated?
Yes.
My sister-in-law, who married my brother Henry, never ever dated anybody, never went out with anyone except my brother. That's the only person ever. Isn't that strange? So, I mean, those things do happen. It's very rare. Tell us a little bit about Dale, what he did in Wadsworth and why he was very important, and a little bit about his family, who his brothers were, and so forth and so on.
Well, and Dale was, during high school, he started working at Burbeck's confectionery store.
Right, down in the South End.
Down in the South End.
That'd be Barris Burbeck, who later became the postmaster and the mayor.
Right.
And then had an automobile agency up on Tolbert Street. And he died, he had two children. One who married Lou Arden Snyder, and that was, I can't think of her name right. Marlene Burbeck, right, married Lou Arden Snyder. Then a younger one or an older one?
Younger.
Younger one, I don't know. I can't remember whom she married. Somebody I know, though. I've forgotten who it is.
I can't think of his name.
It'll come to us.
So they also had had gas pumps out on the curb. They served the cars, remember?
Oh, surely.
The cars would drive up and get their gas on the curb and
They would always,
oil.
you just parked on the streets there.
Just gas and oil. And so he worked there until a little while after we were married, and then he went to work with Alan Hartzell for real estate and insurance.
And then he stayed there forever, didn't he, almost?
No.
Bates and Guiley.
Well, then he was called to the Army.
Yes.
And then when he came back, he was to Alan Hartzell a little while. And then Bates wanted him to come as his partner.
That's
so
Ed Bates.
Ed Bates.
Ed Bates wanted Dale to be a partner, so they then had Bates and Guiley.
That's right.
And that was located near the bank, the Citizens Bank, but where? Tell us a little bit about that place.
That was, well, that's right across from Trinity United Church of Christ.
What's that?
Bates Guiley office was.
Not the first one, though.
The first Bates Guiley office.
Was it really? I thought it was down close to the bank.
Do you mean to begin with?
Yes.
Well, maybe it was to begin with. I only remember the one across from the church.
Well, I'm sure that I'll be told, but if I'm wrong, because, and that's fine.
I could be wrong, but I don't remember.
I
know the
received,
Bates, just the Bates Insurance Company was there down.
maybe then they moved it up there. I will find that out, because every single time that I make a mistake on this program, I get a phone call, and that's fine. We are so appreciative of those phone calls, because what we're trying to do here is not to run a program, but to try to get as much history as we possibly can out of the people, and we want it to be accurate. So we certainly encourage people to call me to let me know that you've made this mistake or that mistake, or this. For instance, I know that I'm positive that someone will call me to tell me what Marlene's sister's name is and whom she married. I'm positive that'll happen, because that happens all the time. You know, we're so indebted to the WCTV. They're the ones who perform, or rather who put this whole thing together for the Wadsworth Area Historical Society. And incidentally, Chlorice, if you're not a member of the Wadsworth Area Historical Society, we'd like to have you become a member of the Wadsworth Area Historical Society. Somebody asked me the other day if he could be a member because he's only 35 years old. It doesn't make a bit of difference how old you are. If you're interested in the history of Wadsworth, we'd like to have you as a member. But WCTV does this all with volunteers. And, you know, you're in good enough shape that you could probably be one of the volunteers to run a camera or something else, because can't you picture yourself on a Saturday morning picking up a camera and running down to the soccer field? And
Not really.
you can get into the games free, Chlorice. You could do that. Then you married Dale in 1934.
Well, then, from Bates Guiley, while he was at Bates Guiley, the state had him, the throughways, the new roads were going through. And so there was a lot of appraising to be done for the property that the state was taking for the new throughways. And so they had Dale do the appraising for him, and then he really enjoyed that. And so then he was offered a job with the Federal Highway Administration at Del Mar, New York. And so we moved then to Del Mar, New York.
For a short period of time.
That was in 1962. And he was appraising up in that area then. And I was teaching piano at that time. And we were there for 12 years, and he passed away then.
Yep, I remember that very sadly. We're going to get to your piano and music. There's so much that we need to hear from you yet. Tell us just quickly a little bit about Dale's brother Louis. He lived here in Wadsworth.
Yes.
And, you know, fortuitously, he had a gas station right next door to where Burbick's used to be.
Yes.
For a little while. He married Ruth O'Mara.
Yes.
And they're both dead now. They had 2 children. And the daughter, lovely, lovely daughter, died here a few years ago.
Right.
It was a pity, just a real pity.
Yeah.
Don't know what she had, but she died. Louis lived in Silver Creek when he first was married, and with Ruth. And we had several of the O'Maras living in Silver Creek. Lomi O'Mara Hickman lived in Silver Creek. Tom O'Mara and Helen Hickman, brother and sister of the Hickmans there, lived in Silver Creek. Ruth O'Mara lived in Silver Creek. So we knew quite a few of them. They're wonderful people. Now, you did teach piano in New York, but you didn't learn to play the piano in New York. Tell us how you became very much interested in music here in Wadsworth and your career, and how it sprang up then.
Well, I took piano lessons from Edna Mills when I was young.
And Edna Mills at that time was pretty old, wasn't she?
Well, of course, to me she seemed old.
Yes. She probably would be about 120, 130 years old now, wouldn't she?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, she's very old, but she was good.
Oh, she was a wonderful musician.
Tough woman.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, a very tough woman. What did she do besides teach piano?
Well, I think she had a piano store
Oh, really? Where was it?
right there on Main Street, up a couple of doors from where Alan Hartzell are.
Oh, she had a piano store?
Yeah.
And by herself?
Yeah, as far as I know. Then she lived with Mrs. Everhard on High Street. Or that was on Main Street.
Mrs. Everhart lived on Main Street? No.
Ella Everhard did.
Oh, Ella Everhart. She lived with her.
Yes.
But she had a piano store. She had pianos in there.
Right.
And she taught music.
Piano.
Now, did you go to the store to take music lessons?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about Mrs. Mills.
Miss Mills.
Miss Mills, rather.
Right. Well, I thought she was a wonderful teacher, and she's a wonderful musician, and everything was music. I mean, we'd go for our lessons, and that's all there was to it. But she was very strict.
Extremely strict.
But she was very nice.
Do you remember how much you had to pay for a lesson?
I think it was $1.
$1 a lesson.
$1 an hour.
That's right, exactly.
An hour.
An hour for a whole hour's lesson. Now you can't, $40, $50, $60 to $100 for an hour lesson from a good piano teacher. How old were you when you first started?
I think I was in the 5th grade.
About 10 years old or so.
Probably.
10 or 11 years old. And how long did you take lessons then?
I think I took them up till about high school.
Now, do you still play?
Yes, sure. But, you know, I'm not a performer.
You're not a performer. Is this
I don't
the way
play for people.
Is this the way that Dale Jr. began his musical career?
I think so, because he got interested because I was playing, and I played the organ a couple of times, and I think that's what got him. He really wanted to do it.
Well, he has gone farther with that than.
Oh, yes.
Because he actually has a university degree in this, is he not?
Not in. He took it in
At
college.
university.
Yes. Well, in fact, he was Professor Endy from Akron University taught him through high school, and then he went one summer to Oberlin, and then he took it in Otterbein. So he's had a lot of
music, and he's very, very good. There's no question about that. Going back now to the Bates and Guiley, how did that become part of a lifestyle for you? And now, what did you have to change in your own mind when Dale went into business for himself?
I don't know if it changed.
You didn't change anything? Didn't you move at the time?
No. Well, he moved to New York.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, that was quite a change, because I was 48 years old and had never moved out of Wadsworth.
Out of Wadsworth, and it's a very, very dramatic move for you.
Yes.
And my understanding from many of our mutual friends is that you were awfully homesick for a long time there in New York.
Oh, I was really happy in New York.
Oh, I thought you were homesick. You were happy?
No, I wasn't really homesick. Well, of course, I always wanted to come home.
Yes.
And we did often to see Dale and his family. But I loved New York. It was just great. I guess I loved it so much because I was teaching, and I enjoyed that so much.
Now, did they come to your home, or did you have a studio somewhere?
No, they came to my home.
They came to your home.
And I belong to the Albany Music Teachers Association and the National Guild of Piano Teachers, who sent judges to appraise my
Right, these are musical
pupils.
judges, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember when you were in New York. My brother was in New York at the same time that you and Dale were there.
I thought so.
Yes, and they talked back and forth because they knew each other, you know.
I see.
They're approximately, well, let's see, Dale would be, what 80?
84.
84 years old, well, the same age as you, and Frank is 77. They knew each other in school.
Oh.
And yeah, they talked back and forth on the telephone. My brother was teaching there at the time at SUNY Albany, State University of New York at Albany. So he would write to tell us, you know, that I saw Dale today, or call Dale on the phone or whatever. And then when Dale would come home, he would say, I saw your brother. So we kept up our communications there. When you were in New York and you were teaching, where were your kids and what were they doing at the time? I think it's extremely interesting.
Well, see, there's 11 years difference between Tom
one
and
and them,
Dale.
that's right.
Now, Dale Jr. was right here in Wadsworth.
And what about?
Or not, he lives in Medina. He's always lived
but in this area.
And Tom was in the 7th grade when we moved, so he became a New Yorker.
He became a New Yorker. What did he do specifically and singularly that, now he's not a musician as Dale is.
Well, he's very good. So he never wanted to take organ, but he's very good at piano.
Piano. And what did he do in New York that I thought was quite significant, intellectually, let's put it that way?
Well, he went to Colgate University.
But wasn't he one of the top students in the class?
Oh, yes.
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 Was he valedictorian?
No, he wasn't valedictorian.
But he was way up there, and everyone knew, and everyone in Wadsworth knew how bright this boy was.
Yeah.
And when he went to Colgate, then he graduated from there, and he went on beyond that, did he not?
No, he didn't.
I mean, as far as his accounting background. Or what is he's in finance one way or another, isn't he not?
He is now, but his major was political science and international relations.
I got that wrong. I thought that he had been in finance and that he was really moved all the way up there quickly because of his...
Well, he has advanced quickly.
Yes.
He was working for the state even in the summertime before he graduated.
In New York?
Yes.
And doing what for the state in New York?
Well, I think he was in education and in the library. And then he moved around after after he graduated from college. Then he moved around to different departments in the state.
And where does he live right now, you told us, but...
Loudonville.
In Loudonville, New York, which is exactly the same place where my brother Frank lived.
Is that right?
Yes, he lived there in Loudonville, New York.
He's not there now?
No, they moved to Washington, D.C., actually to Gaithersburg, which is right outside Washington, because his daughter's with the State Department. As a matter of fact, she is in Russia right now for 4 years and just came back from India for 4 years. They moved down there to be with her. After they had been there for 2 months or so, they transferred her to India.
Oh my goodness.
And then she came back, and they were really pleased with that, and now she's been transferred to Russia. And they're hoping that they all live long enough so that when she comes back, they can watch their grandchildren grow up. What I meant a moment ago when I said that he did something extraordinary was that I had heard that as a youngster, he was already starting on his career up. And you just confirmed that by saying that when he was in high school, he had already done that. We're going to run out of time, but I want you to just tell us some of the things that you want to tell us about regarding Wadsworth. I mean, if you want to use notes or if you want to remember them, whatever. What do you remember about Wadsworth that you would like to tell us?
Well, when I was young, a little kid, well, I don't know who sponsored it, but they used to have lyceum courses at the auditorium.
Tell us what a lyceum course, L-Y-C-E-U-M. Tell us what that is.
Well,
they're no longer around.
They're no longer around. Well, it's too bad because it was fun. We always went to them, and they had different programs. It was a course like through the winter time, maybe once a month, and
where would they be held?
At the high school auditorium.
High school auditorium. And what were they about?
Sometimes there were speeches. Sometimes I remember a magician and music. There was a variety of things.
In other words, it was kind of a community playhouse, as it were.
I think so.
Yes. We don't have that anymore.
No.
I mean, no, you have to go to a concert and 14,000 miles away and so forth and so on, but we used to have a lot of fun with those kinds of things. I remember in 1944 that they brought a group here, I think they call it something like Classical Rhapsody or something like that, which is very, very good. I can still remember going to that, 1943 or 44. During the war, I remember that. I was just a little kid, too. But we used to have those, and that's no longer here. What else do you remember?
Well, we used to always go uptown on Saturday nights.
And why? And what was uptown to you?
Well, it was uptown.
In other words, the South End was way down there, and uptown was on top of the hill.
And they always had a band concert, sometimes an ice cream social, and sometimes we'd go to the picture show, we called it. And then we'd come out, and there was an ice cream parlor right beside the show that you'd go up steps. And
whose ice cream parlor was it?
I've been trying to think whose it was.
Well, we'll pick up that name pretty quickly. I'm sure that someone will call us on that one as well, and that's good. But tell us about that ice cream parlor. There's something significant about it. Was it big?
Yes, it was big, and it had the regular parlor chairs, ice cream parlor chairs and tables, and it was just a fun place to go.
What is there right now, Chlorice?
I'm not sure.
Which picture show did you go to, or which movie? The Strand, okay.
And it was right next door to it.
Right next door. In other words, you would turn right or left when you came out of the Strand. You would turn left and go to that picture show.
Yeah.
I think that it's torn down.
Well, yes,
Yes.
ice cream parlor is torn down.
The ice cream parlor is torn down, but it is right where very, very close to where Dr. Boyer's office is. That's right.
I believe so.
And do you remember anything about the people who worked there?
No, I don't.
You don't remember that. But were they from Wadsworth?
We were pretty little at that time.
You were kind of little. And what else do you remember about Wadsworth that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I don't know.
What about the stores that you would go to here in town? Or let's take the stores in the South End. Starting at the railroad tracks, what were the stores that you can remember?
Well, there was Fenton and Leatherman. There was a dry goods store next door to them, but I don't know who run that. Was it Dutz?
Yes, I believe that's right.
And then there was Curtis grocery store, and there was Giles's Meat Market.
Right.
And of course Burbeck's, and that's about
it. Now, I believe that you went to school with Lloyd Messner, didn't you?
Lloyd Messner.
And Ruby Heiberger?
Harold Heiberger.
You went to school with Harold?
Harold Heiberger.
Okay. They were from there too, and I interviewed Lloyd Messner. I'm going to interview Mrs. Heiberger, Harold's wife, later on as well. But there are so many interesting facets about the South End. What do you remember specifically about the South End on Saturday nights?
I guess I missed it.
You missed it because you came uptown all the time. That's exactly what I wanted you to say. The people in the South End would all come to town at the middle, on Saturday nights. Because there really wasn't a whole lot to do in the South End itself. All of the activity, the popcorn stands, the stores being open, and all of those other kinds of things, that wasn't up in town. And of course, did you?
And my dad knew a lot of people, and he loved to visit with all the people.
And that's what we did.
Yes.
We would go to town, we would visit.
Right,
We would
right.
stay there till 10, 11 o'clock at night just visiting.
That's right.
It was so beautiful. And it seems that it never rained on Saturday night. It was all in the summertime. It was always very, very nice. And
Seemed like it.
people would come, and then I think one of the most interesting things was that most of the farmers would come to town on Saturday night too, and they were so pleased and proud. They would take their bath, and they would put on a clean work shirt or a clean pair of overalls, and they come and they just had a glorious time.
Right.
It was almost like what the kids now say, let's party. They partied, but it was a nice party. Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that the kids don't have nice parties, but it was a different kind of a party. Going back to Dale for a little while, what caused him to become interested in insurance? And then you said that he really enjoyed the appraisal work. How did he ever become involved with that? Because that's not what he was trained to do.
Well, he had had so much experience in selling real estate that when they needed someone to appraise, they got him because of his experience, and he enjoyed it. He really liked that.
How did he become involved with the United States government? I mean, that's very difficult sometimes to do, but we've had several people from Wadsworth who have been singled out by the United States government to help them. Sterling Seacrest is one.
Yeah. He had to fill out, you know, his application, and he'd been in the Army. And through the state, I suppose, or his experience with the state, just showed that he was qualified.
Qualified to do that. Was, when Dale was in town in Wadsworth, what were his civic involvements? And what were your civic involvements here in town? Or still are, probably.
Well, he was with the Lions Club at one time, and he was just pretty busy with his real estate. I don't remember whether there were any other civic.
How about you? Did you get involved with some of the things in town?
Not a lot. I think the Women's Club.
Weren't you one of the original members of the Women's Club?
Yes, I think so.
Yes. And who were some of the other women who were original members of the Women's Club?
Well, I can't say.
Do you remember who some of the women were?
Jennings, her name was Jennings. Can't think of her first name.
Daphne?
Daphne Jennings was one. And they honor them every year. I still go to the Women's Club and they honor them every year. But I can't name them.
Do you remember some of your own friends who were members of the Women's Club?
Now or then?
Then, right.
Well, there was, I really can't, Evelyn Warner, she's died too. I can't remember who they were.
Well, if you can think of some, we'll get those. Who were the kids you played with when you were a little girl, Chlorice?
Well, Doris Transu, Grace Welty, Bernice Buckingham. That's about it.
And they're all from Briggy Street or close by Briggy Street?
Bernice was from Chestnut Street.
But next street over. And what do you remember about the growth of the South End when you were down there? Did it? What caused you got there in 1914? What happened at about 1919, 1920? What kind of growth came into the South End, and why?
I hadn't thought about that.
Well, did you have many people from the European countries before that?
Oh, yes. There were a lot of European people coming in.
They didn't live on Briggy Street particularly, though, did they?
Not in our end. I think maybe farther east there might have been some.
There's some Slovaks who live farther east, that is correct. And then on Walnut Street, Chestnut Street, and Water Street, they had quite a few.
Yes, they did.
And then on State Street, a few of them. I think some of the Germanic people lived on State Street and that. Now, do you remember Peter Baxo's hardware store?
Yes.
Now, when you went in there, what did you remember was significant about that store?
It was big.
Big. And they had more than hardware, didn't they?
Yes, they had clothing.
They had clothing. And who bought clothing there? What kind of clothes was it? What kinds of clothing was it, I should say?
Probably work clothes.
They had some work clothes, but it was a very good quality of fairly inexpensive, was it not?
Well, according to today's standards, yes. Yes.
Well, that's so true. When our kids were small, my wife would buy little girls' dresses. We had one daughter, little girls' dresses for a couple bucks. Now we have a granddaughter, and she saw a dress, and on sale it was $10. The original price was $40. I can't believe it. Absolutely cannot believe it. But you know, it's a long haul. Chlorice, I want to go back to your very early days in Franklin School, and for a specific reason. In 1915, we built Franklin School. Now we're going to build another school because Franklin is no longer viable. In other words, it would take too much to recondition it, and just the electricity alone would be thousands of dollars, because, you know, with computers you have to have different kind of electricity, and the walls and the floors and all those other kinds of things. You walked into a school that was only 5 years old. Can you, in your own mind, tell us what you felt about that school in terms of it being a new school at that time? I mean, we're going to tear it down now. You're going to see the school that you went to be torn down. And it was a brand new school, just about a brand new school when you walked into it. How did you feel about it? Did you have any sense that it was a new school? And did they talk about, oh, we are going to go to the new school? Did they talk about that?
I don't remember that we did. I remember it as being a lovely school, very nice, and we were
How many
proud
rooms
of
did
it.
it have?
How many rooms?
Yes.
About 4.
4. You would walk in, and there's this big center hallway, and then 4 rooms off to the side. And were they all filled?
I think so.
Was it, you had 6 grades there, though, didn't you?
Yes.
So some of the grades were split grades, weren't they? 1 and 2s, and 2 and 3s, and so forth. Do you remember any of those being split grades?
Weren't they all?
Maybe they were. I don't know.
I don't know either.
1 and 2, and 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, and 5 and 6, something like that.
That's when they had promotion twice a year.
Do you remember the promotions twice a year?
Yes.
You had the A and the B?
Right.
And we stopped that many years ago.
Yes.
For instance, people would say, I'm in 1A and I'm in 1B, or I'm in 2A, because you could start school late if you wanted to.
Right.
If your birthday happened to be, you know, after the certain deadline, you could start school, instead of waiting a full year, you could start part of the year. Very difficult to do now because of the tremendous numbers of students that we have, but it was something that was very helpful to the kids at that time. Do you remember who some of the people that you went to school with who are now very, very well known in Wadsworth? Or have been well known in Wadsworth, you know, over the years? Besides Chlorice Bird Guiley.
I can't think of, can you think of some?
Well, let's see. Did Ray Holcomb go to that school?
I didn't know him.
But I think that he did.
He probably. I didn't know him.
And he became very, very well known. Did Sterling Secrets go to that school?
I didn't know him. I should. I know him now.
See, he lived on Walnut Street.
Right.
Born and reared there. Jerry Hall was born and reared on Walnut Street as well.
Is that right?
So a lot of those people from the South End became very, very powerful and well-known community leaders. Jerry Hall, Ray Holcomb, Sterling Sechrist, I'm sure there are others. I'm going to forget some. Do you remember any of the students there who could not speak English because they had come from a foreign country in your school?
There's 2 girls that I remember that I was fond of. Is Josephine Crisafulli.
Josephine Crisafulli.
And Nellie Buemi.
Nellie Buemi. And could they speak English?
I think they could. I think they could.
See, several of us did not speak English before we went to school. I was one of them. And we had to learn to speak English. It's very difficult.
Oh, yes.
But it happened. It happened. Where are Josephine Crisafulli now and Nellie
I have no
Buemi?
idea.
They're not around anymore. And it's a pity. Tell us now again anything else that you want to share with us, because our time is going to be up very soon, and we need to hear from you what it is that you like about Wadsworth and why you came back from New York to Wadsworth even though you loved New York. Tell us about that.
I did love New York, and in New York I was chosen for Marcus Who's Who of American Women.
Wonderful, and deservingly so as well.
And
had you been in Ohio, you would have been chosen for Marcus's Who and Women as well.
Then I moved back to Wadsworth after that.
Why did you move back to Wadsworth?
Because my husband passed away.
Right, and all of your friends were here in family.
All my friends and family, well, I had friends there too, a lot of friends. And family, was a lot of family here. And so it was a matter of leaving Tom in New York or leaving Dale in Ohio. I'd have to go back and forth one way or the other. So Tom was in New York City at that time. They were living there. And I had no idea when they would be back to Del Mar. So I decided to move to Wadsworth.
In Wadsworth. Where do you live now?
I live at Great Oaks Condominium.
Great Oaks Condominium. Clarice, believe it or not, our time is up. It's been a very, very fast hour, and your contributions to Wadsworth history are going to be well recognized for generations to come because you have just been a host, or a guest rather, on Wadsworth History on Film. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you.